Welcome back to the Chad X podcast, guys. I'm your host, Chad, and we have our special guest here today, Ferris. Say hi to the people, Ferris.
Hey guys, it's Ferris.
And today we got a great topic for you. It's one you're probably all extremely aware of. We're going to try to get this out as soon as possible so that all the pertinent information is still pertinent at the time of listening. So at the time of recording, we're a day into the new tariffs that have been placed on China, of course, Canada, and Mexico, more importantly, by Donald Trump and his administration. These tariffs are 25% on all Canadian imports, 25% on all Mexican imports, with the exception, this is a new development that occurred overnight, there's a carve out for car and auto manufacturing related imports from Canada. So this was lobbied by Detroit car makers. They said the entire car industry would crash and there would be no jobs for anybody in that region of the Midwest if there weren't carve outs made for it. Honestly, they were, from what I understand, based on the interviews that were given, they said these carve outs had to be in place permanently. We could not we could not tariff imports from Canada as they relate to the auto industry. But Donald Trump has said that he will be reinstating those tariffs in 1 month. So they have 1 month to try to completely restructure their supply lines and get things set up in a way in which they would still be able to manufacture things exclusively with parts sourced from the United States. The reason this is such a big deal is because the auto industry in Detroit, and in all of the United States, we use Detroit as sort of a byword for the auto manufacturing industry since so much of it is headquartered in that region. But in general, U.S. auto manufacturing, as it currently exists, is a transnational process. So pretty much every single part that goes into the making of a modern automobile crosses national borders several times, either into Canada and back or into Mexico and back. There's not a single part towards any of these vehicles that does not have multiple points on a supply line that cross national boundaries and that won't be affected by the tariffs that are in place. So basically, imagine every single time a part was moved from Canada, like the supply lines, the assembly lines that we think of, the old factories. You have a mental picture of the old days where it was like one person passed it down a conveyor belt to another machine, the machine passed it down to a person, and they were assembling cars like that. The modern assembly line is a series of different stops in different factories all throughout North America, from Canada all the way down to Mexico. So there's no, it's literally tariffing each stop in the assembly line at this point. Your thoughts on that, Ferris?
No, we're starting to see like uh stock market crash, and we're starting to see a lot of the issues that the tariffs are going to be able to impose on this country, and it's just going to get worse since it's now getting full in effect. We do a lot of business with Canada and Mexico, so I don't know how it's going to fully play out. I do see things getting much, much, much more expensive in the next few weeks to couple like months. Um, Weirdly say I see why he's trying to do that, but at the same time it won't work. From research, he basically wants to get everything manufactured back in the US, which is understandable,
For sure.
but it's not gonna happen like that. It's different now, you know? The
From the
way life
pers-
is, you know what I'm saying? The way life is nowadays is way different because these corporations are they're not gonna do that. What's gonna happen is they're gonna just raise up the price of the item, so we're gonna be the consumers are the ones that are gonna be affected by it, compared to the jobs coming back to the U.S. because they don't want to pay fair wages. So that's the one thing I keep thinking about.
from the perspective of this podcast, which to restate our mission, I think we've gotten a little bit distracted lately with just talking about all the crazy stuff going on in the world. But our point of view, the ethos of our core, what we believe in, our true values as a podcast, we care about young people. We believe the gerontocracy,
Hmm.
the old people. I believe this at least. Ferris is a little. He's a little sort of more centrist, more in the middle. But me, I'm
Hmm.
I'm pretty far in the direction of the youth. I always want to promote
Hmm.
policies that are beneficial to the youth and stop the current administration, the global administration, really, the sort of political culture, which I believe is acting as a siphon, basically sucking all the money away from the young people all around the world and using it to basically give welfare to old people. In America, that takes the form of Medicaid for a large part, Social Security for a large part, regressive tax policies, which tax young people who are working and earning an income more than they tax old people who are earning money off of their investments and off of their retirement savings. Just in general, we have a lot of policies that have been put in place over the past few decades, which I believe are subsidizing life for old people at the expense of young people. So I always want to get away from that. Some of Trump's policies, namely, the policies that he's using to encourage American manufacturing to grow, I believe are going to be great for young people. I believe that's for the best. We've seen the American manufacturing, the jobs base in general, just completely decimated. Pre-COVID, since the Reagan administrations, when a lot of people really noticed it starting. Some people go further back. They go back to the Johnson administration when he was trying to create his golden society. Introduced a lot of welfare programs which have since been co-opted and become gerontocratic. They're old people benefiting programs primarily. So there's a lot of starting points different people will label, but in general, I think it's pretty well accepted that we're at the point where the system does not benefit young people and especially young working class people. So I'm
Yeah.
always going to promote policies that are, or give kudos to politicians who will take an effort towards making things better for young people. And some of Trump's policies have been argued to be that they're pro youth, pro working class. If you're pro working class in this country, you're often pro youth because the baby boomers are the richest generation in history, especially here within the United States. So if you're doing anything that's for workers, and two, people with less money, that's usually skewing younger. The interesting part is the two Trump policies, which most people have said will benefit the youth the most, are this general idea of reestablishing American manufacturing, which these tariffs sort of are. But I will say, tariffing Canada in particular, Mexico, a little more understandable, but tariffing Canada in particular is interesting because we are just so deeply enmeshed economically that it may do more harm than good. We know it's going to cause some economic harm to the stock market. It's having that right now. We just saw the biggest crash since COVID. And COVID was the biggest crash since 2008. So, things are accelerating. We're seeing a lot of market shocks as a result of these tariffs. The stock market did rally a little bit, especially the big three Detroit auto manufacturers, GM, Ford, the like. They've rallied. Their stock prices have gone way up because, economists and people who work in finance realize that if these tariffs went through, there would be a real chance that American auto manufacturing would not survive. It would just completely collapse, and we would not have an American auto industry anymore. With these carve-outs, we're going to have an American auto industry for at least one more month because they're just not going to be tariffed. They're going to be able to use their old supply lines and their old manufacturing bases and stores. So there's one benefit there. In terms of how it affects young people or old people, just in general, if they can find a way to completely reshore and bring back all parts of that supply chain, which I don't know if auto manufacturers will be able to, but a lot of other companies, I think to some degree, will be able to. We could see a big shift in the bargaining power of American workers. We could see higher wages as they'll be able to demand it because offshoring will be increasingly difficult. That's the one thing Trump hasn't touched on, which I really, if I was his advisor, or if I had the ear of one of his advisors, or if anybody who could reach out to him, that is the one thing I would say is tariffs are interesting and they're a tool you can use. What I would much rather see though is sort of a labor tariff. I believe what this administration really wants to do, if they want to pass a policy that really excites the working class and makes them happy, is charge companies a certain percentage of the wages they're paying in taxes for every worker they offshore, for every foreign worker that they use, not just with the H-1B visas and the illegal immigrants that they use as labor in a lot of the chicken packing factories and manufacturing, but explicitly jobs that they offshore to India, the Philippines, China, Vietnam, those type of manufacturing jobs. And I get that the tariffs are sort of an attempt to do that, but I would say if there's a way to force the regulations through in which companies have to report the total amount of foreign laborers they employ in their factories and how many sweatshop workers does Nike have in Bangladesh, and we could impose a direct tax on that company saying for each worker you're using in a foreign company to manufacture anything in a foreign country, we are going to make you pay a certain amount of a tax to the United States. I think that would be the best thing. That being said, that does sort of go against what the Elon Musk and that branch, the Doge branch of the government currently believes in, because they're trying to reduce the amount of people in the United States who are regulating things. They're trying to lay off workers, and they are. They laid off, I think, 75,000 VA workers recently, so they're really trying to downsize the administrative state, and you would probably need to actually increase the size of the IRS in particular to be able to track all that and make sure things are reported properly and there wasn't an even larger degree of tax evasion going on. Your thoughts, Ferris?
I think you're 1,000% right. This administration, I feel like, is focusing on the wrong things in my eyes right now. I feel like what they're preaching. Well, to be fair, they have said this to everybody during elections. He said, "I'm going to tariff everybody," you know, but people just majority of Americans don't understand what fully is a tariff, and what does it do? Because all they complained about was like the price of eggs, which is valid. We want the prices to go down because cost of living is expensive. You know, so seeing what's going on right now, you have to focus on the youth because that's who's right now struggling the most in this country. Hard to find a job. Um, Prime example, tech industry right now is getting gutted, gutted from AI, gutted from H-1B1 visas because people they're trying to offshore these jobs instead of keeping the jobs in the United States for the American people, especially the American youth. So we're going through I feel like it's a crisis. That's what's happening, especially with the youth, because their life are paused for now. Um, I don't know what's gonna happen next couple of years with that because I don't think it's gonna get better. I think it's gonna get worse.
Yeah,
So
the real question is going to be who's going to be more affected by the downturn? Because there is going to be an economic downturn as a result of this. That's something
hmm
pretty much everybody agrees on. And if it doesn't happen, hey, I mean, I was wrong, but I would be extremely shocked if we didn't see another recession. The question is who's going to be most affected? Is it going to be the old people? I'd be fine with that. If we got a type of recession where young people like really were generally unaffected and old people lost all their money, all their retirements, and all their jobs, I'd count it as a win, honestly. I might vote for Trump for a third term. Let him be dictator if he can get that to happen. But chances are it'll probably affect workers. I don't know. I don't know. That's the real. I'm really actually trying to think about it. It's a real thought experiment, and I want to keep seeing what happens, and who's most affected by all this. But it's going to be interesting to see is this economic downturn going to be catastrophic for the elderly Americans and irritating for young people, or is it going to be the inverse, which a lot of things have been. 2008 in particular, people who were fresh college graduates, fresh high school graduates who graduated into that labor market, their careers were stunted, their wages were stunted, whereas baby boomers and Gen X in general were less affected by it. So that was an example of an economic downturn recession that disproportionately impacted the youth, especially since that was sort of the death knell for American manufacturing. It had been dying since the 80s and 90s, but after 2008, you pretty much weren't going to find somebody who was working a factory job unless they're like a 50-year-old guy who's been with a union and they just can't get rid of his job somehow. But in general, young people, that was the end of that. And young people were the most affected by that downturn. If this one goes that same way, I think we're going to probably see some riots in the street. I mean, we're already facing a level of political instability. The only reason people aren't going crazy is because they feel like they have something left to lose. Like most people, they don't want to end up homeless. They don't want to lose their jobs. But
yeah,
if we have mass unemployment like we did during COVID without the stimulus to support it, which they're not going to do stimulus again. They didn't like it last
no,
time. So if we have anywhere near COVID levels of unemployment with no stimulus, I mean, we said people were so fed up and frustrated and needed things to do. That was part of the catalyst for the George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter riots that occurred. You know what I mean? That big protest movement that swept the country. They tried. I mean, you saw they tried to create a lot of stuff in Seattle, Minneapolis. A lot of stuff happened all around the country last time.
yeah,
We had a lot of young people unemployed. If that happens again, we'll see. It might be, man. It would be really interesting to see what happens in the face of that.
I
But
agree.
I do think it's. I think the thing this time though is the government's going to be more prepared to crack down on it. There's been a lot of police militarization that's occurred. There's what they call Cop City in Atlanta has been
Yeah,
developed. So it'll be interesting to see, especially with the detention practices that they've had time
yeah,
to ramp up and practice with the migrants they've been deporting.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. That's a real chance. The worst case scenario is a bunch of young people lose their jobs, become unemployed, on the verge of homelessness. They protest, riot, whatever you want to call it, and immense crackdown, and we got a couple million more young people in prison, which is, I mean, that's a real possibility.
Sad. Yeah, the U.S., in my opinion, it's been for some time, but it's starting to become more and more like a police state. So they're cracking down big time, big time. I saw a report actually. I think yesterday Trump was saying to Congress. He was saying that like he's signing into effect where like if you kill a cop, basically you get automatic like death penalty, which is a very scary thing because I'm like, well, that doesn't make sense to me because I'm like, I'm not okay. I'm not saying killing him is bad. It's good. Well, I'm saying the fact what happens in the situation is more, like let's say if this cop has a vendetta against me that he doesn't like me somehow, attacks me, tries to comes after me, stuff like that, tries to kill me. Are you saying I don't have the right to self-defense? Point is, I think this country is becoming more of like a police state and cracking down on the youth and trying to get them like in jail is not going to be a good thing. It's to me that's right there. The United States itself is done. If you do something like that, the United States is done. It's this the sense of democracy or republic that we have is not what we have anymore. I'll be honest with you, Chad. So I think that's straight up authoritarian. You know, coming
Yeah,
after the other side of the spectrum. Like if you're targeting a specific side and you start coming after them, and then of course speaking about, oh, I'm thinking of doing a third term and all that stuff, and knowing, you know, and it was like when they were bringing up the third term stuff on in Congress. It was not like, oh, anybody can get a third term. No, no, no. They made it like if you became president and lost election and then became president, like how what happened with Donald Trump, then you can go for a third term, which doesn't make sense. You know what I'm saying? They did that because I'm guessing they don't want like presidents like let's say Obama to go for a third term.
because he'd win. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So it's a really, really weird situation we're living in right now. So I don't know.
It reminds me a lot of the fall of the Soviet Union. Well, not the fall necessarily, but the decline. The Soviet Union had
Yeah.
always had what are called the secret police, which were sort of a combination of deputized civilians and plainclothes police officers. So we sort of, I mean, there's a lot of people say that in America we have our own secret police, which is plainclothes undercover police officers who go around and try to entrap people by saying, "Hey, you got any drugs to buy? You got any this, any that?" So I mean, it's not completely separate from anything that's currently done, but it would be interesting to see if we got to a point where that reached Soviet Union levels, where towards the end of their empire, I think it was something like 1 in 4 of their citizens or something crazy. I'll try to find the stat and link it, but like 1 in 4 of their citizens was technically speaking a member of the secret police.
Hmm.
At the end of the Soviet Union, so we could reach if we had riots and crackdowns and all this stuff going on, and Trump won it, or whoever the leaders were. Trump might be dead by that point. He's in his 80s now. You know what I mean? Or I think he's ancient. So
Yeah.
whoever does take over in that event, JD Vance, whatever, if they wanted to sort of deputize people and say you're a cop, you report on any illegal gatherings you see, any people who are plotting to riot or overthrow, destroy businesses, things like that. We could see, something very similar to what we saw right at the tail end of the Soviet Union, where the government has sort of lost control on most things. So they just become increasingly violent and vicious. That's entirely a possibility. If that happens, though, I that's what I'm saying. I completely would not mind as long as their primary targets were old people. You want to talk about leeches and fraud and people who are bad for society? Do it to the old people, because if you do it to too many young people, you're going to lose complete economic productivity. Tariffs and all your young people in jail out of the workforce
Hmm.
does not make for a viable economy. You will literally see collapse. You would literally see people not having clean water. You would see rolling blackouts like we
Hmm.
saw, like we see in third world countries today. Where you have electricity one day, you don't the next. So if that's
One
what
thousand percent.
if that's what they want to see, because old people they can't do jobs as effectively as young people, and a lot of them can't even work anymore. So if they do these mass crackdowns on young people who are going to be the ones losing their jobs and being the most upset by the system, and in combination with the Doge plan to cut everything, basically cut all government workers that you don't know about, cut all expenditures, get everything down to the minimum workforce necessary. We'll see if that ultimately leads to the ability of the government to cease functioning. I mean, right now his plan is sort of what they do in private business, which is cut everybody, see who you actually did need in the end, and then try to bring them back. But
Yeah.
I don't know if that works for government. We'll see though. It's going to be really, really interesting the next few years, and I think a lot of people are underestimating how big of a shift these tariffs could be for our economy and just our political system, because the economics and the politics of the U.S. are so deeply tied together that the minute people's money starts looking weird, we might see a whole new system. Parties are born and die when economics shift this much.
Yeah. Dude, it's again, people a lot of people these days they want to like make fun of the youth and they want to say, oh, they're lazy also. But guess what, buddy? When your retirement age and stuff happens, who's the one that's carrying you guys to be able to have its retirement? It's the youth. Like you said,
Absolutely.
without productivity, this country can't grow nowhere, nowhere.
Yeah.
And the old people can't do anything. What are they doing? They're sitting at home doing nothing. Who's gonna fix my pipes? Who's
Yeah.
gonna fix my roads? Who's gonna fix all this? It's the youth.
It's not
You
going
know
to
what
be a
I'm saying?
70-year-old man. I'll tell you that right now.
It's definitely not gonna be. Definitely not. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, no, they're gonna find
So
out. Well, hey, I'm not saying I'm ready for it, because if push comes to shove and I can't find a job for a long extended period, I might be out there in the streets doing the riots, getting cracked down on. Rubber bullets hit me in the spine, but I mean, I'm ready. I'm ready to see some people get their comeuppance. You know what I mean? These are the people who are so anti-youth and so pro funneling all the money and all the resources and all the opportunities away from young people. I'm ready for them to see what happens when the world relies on old people to get anything done and all the young people are
yeah,
unable to function. They're not going to like how the world looks. So I guess if you're a person who's optimistic and wants things to go well and you're just hopeful, then this is going to be a bad time. But if you're a vengeful person, if you're a little bit petty, if you're ready to see people suffer and laugh at it, hey, welcome to the team. We're gonna be roasting. We're gonna be roasting chocolate and making food at the campfire as the whole world burns down, or at least the whole United States, and probably Canada and Mexico with us. Unfortunately, sorry to my Quebecois people. How do you say sorry in French? Let me look it up.
s'il vous plaît.
S'il
No,
vous
no,
plaît.
no, 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 no.
S'il vous plaît.
Pardon.
Pardon, my
Pardon.
friends. There
Sorry,
we go. Pardon,
sorry about that, guys.
pardon, my Canadian friends. And with that, we're going to say au revoir. Thank you. Please like and subscribe. However you say that, we'll figure it out tomorrow. Have a wonderful day. Say bye to the people first.
Bye, guys.